Okay, so we've set up our processing system for the Zybo Z7 board, and we have created our VHDL wrapper, which means that we are now ready to go through and use the Flow Navigator to synthesize, implement, and generate a bit stream for our system. This project isn't particularly interesting for any of these steps, so I'm going to leave more discussion about these for a different project where we actually use the programmable logic. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and say generate bitstream. You can either go and run synthesis, let it complete, run implementation, let it complete, and then generate bitstream, or you can just hit generate bitstream if you just want to go through the whole process at once. It'll give you a warning saying it needs to go through synthesis and implementation. You say, okay. In general, you want to let this run with as many number of jobs as you can. Usually for something like this, that's a simple project. You will only ever automatically use one anyways. But this is just how many CPU cores you have available on your computer to perform synthesis and implementation if you have a complex project that needs all of those. But in general, just leave it high and let the system decide how many cores it needs. So then you can go ahead and say, okay. And now this takes a couple of minutes. On something like this, it will just be a couple of minutes. On a more complex project, it could be hours. So if you're doing this on a more complex project at work, then there are instances where it even makes sense to just let this run overnight. But since we're just creating this simple processing system only, then this will just be a moment. What we can do is we can go back to Project Manager, and we can come back here to the project manager and look at the synthesis and implementation status. And then also down here at the bottom, we can look at our out of context runs, which I'll discuss more later, but in general, it just means that each of the blocks in our block diagram are synthesized separately, which makes things go a lot faster for subsequent synthesis runs. If you have a lot of blocks and only one of them changes, the project doesn't need to resynthesize all of the IP blocks that have already previously been synthesized. So that's what these out of context runs are describing. So you can see it's already complete down here. So we'll just let synthesis and implementation run, and I will jump forward now to when those are complete. All right, and so as you can see, the bitstream generated successfully, which means that synthesis and implementation worked correctly as well. And if you look down here, you can see that it only took about a minute and a half to go through that whole process. So pretty quick for just the processing system. We can go ahead and open our implemented design, which will bring up an inside view of the FPGA that we're using. And there's not much to see right now because all of this in here is the programmable logic, and we're not using any of the programmable logic. So you can zoom in, and I'm going to discuss more of this in detail. But as you can see, there is a lot of hardware, configurable logic blocks that are available, the RAMs that are available, lots of other hardware that is inside of the FPGA to do all of the soft logic that we might want to do, but that'll be discussed later. Over here, this is where the processing system is. And again, there's not a whole lot to see. The only thing that's worth looking at is that you have all of these input IO pads, input output pads, where everything that we saw, the DDR and the fixed IO going outside of the chip, those all get routed out to an external IO to go onto the circuit board. So again, we'll discuss this more in future videos, but in general, you can also come up here and look at how all this gets routed. So you can see that we have the processing system CPU core down here, and you can see where all of this gets routed out to the IO pads. Interesting to look at, and it'll become more relevant in future videos as well. Now that we have our bitstream generated, we need to get this exported to go to Vitis, which allows us to use the CPU that we've created here to perform software development tasks. So the way that we do that is we go to File, Export, Export Hardware. Through this, we say Next. We want to include bitstream. The file name is just fine, and it automatically exports to whatever project folder we're using right now, so that works. And then that's all there is to it. We say finish, it'll run an export of the hardware platform. So that is all done. And now we need to come and find our Vitis software. So you'll notice here that we have both Vitis and Vitis Classic. Vitis is the newer version that AMD has been working through. They also call it Vitis Unified. we're not going to use this one right now. We're going to use Vitis Classic, which is the version of Vitis that's based on an older version of Eclipse that has been in use for a long time now. And so a lot of projects that aren't new within the last year or two will be using Vitis Classic, and a lot of tutorials that are still online use this one. So when you open up Vitis, it'll ask you to choose a workspace. And this is just the file folder where you want all of your project files to be stored. So I've created a new folder under the processing system hello world name. Then we can go ahead and click launch. It'll give you a warning saying that there's a newer version available, but we want to say, yes, we understand and want to continue with classic. So that'll bring up this window. And what we want to do is create an application project. We can click through here. This is just describing the difference between the processor and hardware, what goes into the platform project, and what goes into the system project, which I will talk through throughout this process. Because you can either choose a Xilinx development board that has a built-in repository, which we're not using. We're using a digital int board. And so in general, we are going to be using a .xsa, which is that hardware file that we exported. So what we can do is we can navigate to our Vivado project and find our wrapper.xsa that we just exported. We want to select generate boot components. You have to give a name. We have to choose which processor we want to use. So this is a dual core processor. So we can either choose to use core 0, core 1, or use them both for symmetric multiprocessing. We just want to use a single core for this instance. We also have to choose an operating system. So you can either choose standalone or a free real-time operating system. We just want to do everything in standalone or bare metal, you might hear it called. You can also choose architecture if that's an option, but the Zybo board only supports a 32-bit architecture, so that is our only option. Now you have a choice. You can either create an empty application, a hello world application, or one of a variety of other tests that Xilinx provides for you. One note is that I always start with a hello world application, not an empty application, for the reason that the hello world application adds in several components that help serial communication between the Zybo and my host computer. So now that we've created this hello world application, what we can do is we can navigate up here to source and look at our .c file. And you can see that it automatically includes the Xilinx printf statement, which is just a lightweight version of the standard C printf that's optimized for embedded applications. You have the standard IO, and you have the platform.h included. And so all of these, including the init platform and the cleanup platform, are needed if we're going to do any sort of IO over the UART that is built into the processing system. And so anytime I want to use a UART, I always just start with this basic hello world application, just because all of that is included for me. So now we're ready to boot up our Zybo for the first time. And so there are a couple of things that we need to make sure are set up appropriately. So the first is this jumper over here, number 26. If you look over here, it says programming mode select jumper. We are going to be programming a JTAG over UART. So we'll have a micro USB connection here, and you can see that it's programming for UART is how that is set up. And then the other options are to boot over QSPI, which is flash memory that is hardware on the board. That's a little bit more complicated to use, and we're not going to work with that. And then we also have an option to boot from an SD card, which is common if you're booting any sort of embedded Linux. But we're doing this as simply as we can, so we're just going to use the JTAG. So the jumper should be on the furthest right and then the next right pin. We also need to choose how we want to power the board. We can choose, you can see here, they have a little diagram for you. If you're powering from this wall jack, you want the jumper on the top two. If you're powering from the same USB, so it's operating as both power and communication, then you want it from this bottom two, which is how we are going to have it set up. And then if you're powering from an external battery, you bridge the middle two. Almost always you'll either be using a wall power or a USB power, and I'd recommend usually using the USB power. The only time you really need to use a wall power is if you're pulling more current from your project than the USB can handle, which is a couple hundred milliamps usually. So for most of our simple applications, we will just be using the USB so that we don't need to worry about any sort of external power. So once those two jumpers are set up, we have our power switch, which we can turn on, which will give you a power good light over here. So now we need to set up some way to communicate over UART between our host PC and the Zybo. So the way that is generally recommended by DigitalInt is getting some sort of terminal software like PuTTY or TerraTerm. I will be using PuTTY. If you need to download PuTTY, there are two options on Windows. You can either just do a quick search for PuTTY, and this is the standard PuTTY download location. This will tell you how to download it. So if you click to say download here, you have a couple of different options to install the MSI or the tarball. Alternatively, you can download the official version from the Microsoft Store, which is up here. Previously, there was a version of PuTTY on the Microsoft Store that was a knockoff from somebody else, but the real version of PuTTY is now officially available on the Microsoft Store as well. So it's up to you however you want to download that. Once you have PuTTY downloaded, you can bring it up. We are going to set up a serial communication session. So you can see that I've already gone through this process and saved all the settings that work for me. So I'm going to start there. You can say, click on it, load. So for those who haven't used PuTTY before or set up a serial communication network, the choices are you choose serial, you set up the baud rate, which is always 115/200 for communication to the processing system's UART port. You can also see that here, that the PS7 UART is configured to 115/200. Set up serial, and then the COM that you're choosing is the serial line. And the way that you find that is you can search for device manager, and then you can look here for ports when your Zybo is on. And if you only have one, then that's easy. If you have multiple, then just turn off your Zybo. It'll refresh and that'll go away. And then you can turn it back on. It'll come back, and going through that process, you can see which of the USB serial ports is being used by the Zybo. So my computer is set up for COM4, so that's all I need to know there. So I put that in the serial line, and then under here, under connection, we can go to serial, and this is the whole setup with the speed again, number of data bits, number of stop bits, no parity control, no flow control. And this is all described in the DigitalInt documentation, but it's all here as well. So what we can do is we can go ahead and open that, and we now have a blank serial terminal open. All we need to do is build and run our Hello World program. One thing I'm going to do here is add in my new line at the end of this. So it's something I prefer to do at the end of all of my lines. So then what we do is click on our system, and then you can either right click and say build, or click the little hammer over here. So we built the system. Again, this will take a minute. It'll say the build finished successfully. You'll get some green check marks over here on debug, and we're now ready to load our system. So all we have to do then is right click, say run, launch hardware. The system will load, and if everything was successful, it'll print out my application. So that's our Hello World application. We've now successfully gone through the process of instantiating, building, and running our software system, and ensuring that all of our programming jumpers and power jumpers are set up correctly, making sure that we can export to Vitis, and getting a basic application to run. If you didn't have a terminal system like PuTTY or TerraTerm available, then we have that set up now, and we now have a good way to perform software development on the embedded ARM processor inside the Zynq. Right now, we're not taking advantage of any of the benefits of the FPGA built into the Zynq, and so discussing the use of the programmable logic in the FPGA will be the topic of our next video.